After business school, Bob accepted a job at the old and respected insurance firm of Ringwald Farm and Industrial Casualty. The HR department wasn't his first choice, but it was a start. He wore dark wool suits with muted pinstripes, dark red neckties, and slip-on loafers with little tassels. He moved to a downtown apartment so he'd be near the huge Ringwald building. Bob was given a desk and a cubicle near a window that had two real walls and a light fixture overhead. He put a potted palm in the corner and bought an electric pencil sharpener and an expensive blotter for his desk. It looked almost like a private office. He decided on using the less formal Bob Smith Turner for his nameplate. And he chose to eat lunch in the cafeteria. Every day he ordered a bowl of chicken noodle soup, 2 packets of soda crackers, and salad dressing made with salad Thousand Islands. He worried about the pickles in the dressing might give him garlic breath, and was careful to always end each lunch with a mint lifesaver. After just 2 months on the job, it was his extraordinary good luck to be given his own parking place in the covered garage. A parking spot was much more important to Ringwald employees than anyone from the outside could know. Never again would he have to get wet in the rain, and more importantly, everyone who didn't have a parking spot, and that was the majority of Ringwald employees, didn't have the bright blue corporate sticker on the corner of their windshield. The moment he eased his Accord into parking spot 124 was the last happy moment he would have for the next 3 months. There was trouble right away. The vents from the cafeteria kitchen blew with a ferocious blast on his parking spot. It was so bad that on most days he had a grease lick on his windshield and had to drive out of the garage with the washer and wipers going. Within a week, his car smelled like fried food. Some days it smelled like onion rings, and some days fish and chips. Nothing could get rid of the smell. The little cardboard Christmas trees only made it worse, and a complete inside and outside cleaning only helped until he parked under the blast again. The world came crashing in one day when his boss asked him to drive to a business lunch. Someone had written, "Hi Bob," in the grease on his windshield. The next day, they all started poking fun. "What's for lunch, Bob?" "What's that fish I smell?" "We must be having fish and chips today." "Do we have any extra French fries?" He gritted his teeth and wouldn't say a word, but the jokes kept coming. Business school hadn't prepared him for this, so he bought one of the many self-help business books he saw for sale at the bookstore near his apartment. The Bradley Book of Business Tactics looked like the most promising because the man on the cover looked just like he wanted to look when his career took off. And the testimonial on the back said that the book offered positive solutions to real-world problems. That sounded exactly like his problem. Using the reasoning method explained in the book, he concluded that the only logical conclusion was to change what was served in the cafeteria so it wouldn't stink up his car and make his life hell. He asked to meet with the food service manager and explained in the most positive way that it was a new day and lighter foods were all the rage. He went on to suggest that an expanded salad bar with maybe a little extra tuna or cold cuts for the meat lovers, but nothing fried. Fried foods were out. The food service manager had been at the Ringwald company since the family owned it, and she was ready to retire the first time anyone said something she didn't like. She certainly didn't like this little punk, who hadn't even been with the company a year telling her what to do. But he wasn't worth quitting over. Instead, she decided to explain things to him. "Listen, kid, I don't even know your name," before he walked over to me. "Look at the salad bar behind you. It wouldn't even be here if the president didn't like salads. I throw away more lettuce than I sell. And you see that dressing? We have to stir that stuff all the time or it dries and gets the skin over it. See that bowl of pickled beets? Well, that's the same damn pickled beets we've had there a year. No one eats beets. But if you have a salad bar, people expect to see them along with croutons and sunflower seeds of all things. Who the hell puts nuts on their salad? And don't get me going about garbanzo beans. Good thing they last forever. At least I think they do. Face it, kid. People talk lettuce and they buy deep fried. I sell what people buy, and that hasn't changed in 30 years. Now go on and do your job and I'll do mine. And off she went in her green uniform and hairnet, a vital lesson in how an hourly employee can tell a junior exec to stuff it. This was not the way the Bradley book said things would work out. On top of that, now he had to worry about the freshness of the Thousand Island dressing he ate for lunch every day. It was an awful day. At his lowest ebb, downcast and at a loss, he heard for the first time the nickname that would follow him everywhere for the next few weeks. Hey, French Fry, how's it going today? He was sure that no one named French Fry ever got promoted. It was time for action. It was time for a new book. The Bradley book hadn't performed, and had to be replaced as soon as possible. Leading by objective, Lessons of the Great Khan had to be the ultimate. It had a fierce-looking cover. Its instructions in strict discipline and proper behavior at all times led naturally and as a matter of course to success, and it seemed ultimate in self-help instructions. Unfortunately, his new upright posture and grim seriousness led a co-worker to comment that he was wearing his hat too tight. This seemed overwhelmingly funny to the others at the business table, and from then on he was called Too Tight Turner, replacing the nickname French Fry forever. It was fortunate that his lunchmates were not present when the fellow in the cubicle across from his told him that he was walking around like he had a fudgesicle up his ass. He couldn't have lived with the nickname Fudgesicle. Too Tight Turner, or simply Too Tight, started buying business books by the armload, including See It and Be It by Julius Caesar Caldwell. He bought them off the racks, he bought them on the bargain tables, he checked them out of the library, he bought them in used bookstores. No one knew the market better than Too Tight. Too Tight was just brimming over with self-help. One day he dug through his meticulously kept files to take a second look at the company parking permit. It was issued by the facility manager down on the first floor. In a burst of desperation, he nearly ran to the elevator and down to the facility manager's office. Oh yeah, parking spot 124. I'm surprised you haven't been here sooner. That's a terrible place to park. It's usually the first parking place people get in the garage. Another one is opening in a week. I'll just trade spots for you. That okay? The simplicity of it was at once exhilarating and a letdown. Working in the HR department was not all that Bob had envisioned. When he spoke to entry-level employees, they seemed downright hostile. And at a new employee orientation luncheon, he was sure that somebody threw a grape at him and when his back was turned. When he rarely got to speak with upper-level management, they seemed bored and impatient. Bob took these experiences as evidence of low morale. Something had to be done. Bob called Julius Caesar Caldwell, in his mind the grand old man of motivational speakers. Julius was semi-retired and living in Tarpon Springs, Florida. He agreed to fly to Seattle to speak before the annual employee dinner. As luck would have it, Julius had known the company founder, Clarence Ringwald, back in the 1930s when he sold office paper. That afternoon, before the big event, Bob drove to the airport to pick him up. A black cloud of doom settled over him the moment he saw Julius get off the airplane. The kindly grandfather figure with the trademark flowing gray hair was falling down drunk and could only walk with the help of an angry flight attendant who was happy to hand him off to Bob. He must have brought a flask with him on board. I'm sure as hell we don't serve that much alcohol to anybody. Bob drove him straight to the emergency room at the Burien Hospital in hopes of getting him in condition for the presentation in the morning. It was after midnight before Bob spoke with a doctor. The gentleman is a long-term alcoholic. By the looks of him, he's taken reasonable care of himself under the circumstances. His liver isn't in as bad a shape as I would have thought. I've done everything I can for him, some B vitamin injections and whatnot, but he's not going to get well unless he stops drinking. The best thing you can do for him right now is to make sure he eats and gets plenty of sleep. In the morning, Bob felt wrung out and sleep deprived, but Julius seemed chipper and ate a 4-egg omelet and drank a pot of coffee. He cleaned up well enough and wore a pale gray suit, pink shirt, navy tie, and he walked the Ringwald halls, introducing himself to everyone who had time to talk. Some of Bob's old admiration for Julius was returning as he watched the old man work the crowd. Bob had only 10 minutes of the annual employee dinner and was careful to take only a minute to introduce the finest motivational speaker on earth, Julius Caesar Caldwell. He began, Ringwald Farm and Industrial Casualty is a fine old firm with roots back further than many of you may know. I knew your founder, Clarence Ringwald, and it was my honor to sell him stationery and business forms for several years. In those days, not only your reputation, but who you did business with was critical. Good firms wouldn't do business with crooks even if the transaction itself was a legal one. Clarence Ringwald knew better than anyone, and he knew that insurance business was more than any other dependent on good reputation and honor. Can Ringwald Farm and Industrial still make this claim? Bob was beginning to feel uncomfortable. Julius was turning bright pink against his snow-white hair, and Bob was afraid the crazy drunk who got off the airplane yesterday was making a comeback. The answer is no. You can't make that claim. Your company is like any other. You'll do business with anyone as long as there's a buck in it. I'll wager that not one in 10 of you knows who owns the company. William Steller, the president and CEO, was sitting at the table in front, flanked by his vice presidents. He hadn't turned pink. He was in fact ashen white. All of them looked downright sickly. Steller slowly stood and folded his napkin on the table. He looked directly at Bob and walked out the room. Bob could feel the angel of death's wings beating around his head. The situation was beyond salvaging. Julius stood there as if he had been stunned even by himself. The room was dead silent. Bob walked over and calmly put his hand on Julius' shoulder and asked him to take a seat. The room emptied. Julius said, "I'm sorry, Bob. I was right, but inappropriate. I can't see the line any longer. I'm so sorry." Company security men escorted Julius to a cab, and that was that. Disaster sends out a sign of a kind of sonar, warning all of its approach. The halls were empty as Bob walked back to his desk. The unfinished projects on his desk seemed small and inconsequential, work that should have been completed effortlessly. He sat motionless at his desk until the phone rang. It was William Steller's secretary, informing him that he had an appointment with the president first thing in the morning. The message was so brief and to the point that it might have been a recording. Under the blind, suffocating terror, Bob felt puzzled. It surely wouldn't take the president to fire him. Nearly anyone could do that. Why would Steller want to chew on him before he threw him out on the street? Bob gave up trying to sleep that night about 3 a.m., and he showered, shaved, dressed, and sat frozen in front of the television until 7 a.m. when the phone rang. It was Nordica. "I'm leaving you, Bob. You put off marriage until your career got started, and now you haven't got a career. Everybody knows you lost me. I have someone else now. Goodbye forever, you bum." And just like that, his girlfriend was gone along with everything else. William Steller was famous within the insurance industry. He had taken over after a period of decline when the Ringwald family attempted to operate on a business-as-usual basis. Steller took the company public and, by all accounts, made the Ringwalds and the new shareholders wealthy. He was rarely in the office. He golfed, flew around the world, and ran marathons. When he did appear at the office, he was usually dressed in polo shirts and khakis. He was bald, deeply tanned, and obviously athletic. The company remained profitable while other independent insurance companies were bought out or went broke. Bob had never been on the top floor of the Ringwald building before. It was north of downtown Seattle in the University District, overlooking Lake Washington and Mount Rainier. When the elevator doors opened to the big windows, he was surprised that it was a glorious day. He was sure that he had driven in rain. Were the windows tinted, or were they above the clouds? The secretary tapped her pencil to get his attention. Her office was exquisite. Her desk was huge and teak without a paper on it. The wool carpet was a deep slate green. The office plants were good-sized trees. She wore clothes so obviously expensive that they may as well have had their labels on the outside. Her hair and makeup were so perfect they were a marvel. As she moved, she smelled of expensive perfume, and when she spoke, she smelled of mints. She spoke to him as if she didn't want to waste any more words on such a lowly creature and were absolutely necessary. His numbness was fading, and terror was slowly creeping in when she said suddenly, "Go in now," without a noticeable signal from Stellar. "Oh, there you are. Good morning, Mr. Turner." William Stellar was climbing off an exercise bicycle and picked up a golf club. Mozart's The Magic Flute was playing in the background. "I've been thinking about you all morning. At first I thought Mr. Caldwell had surprised you along with the rest of us. Very sloppy if that were true. But the coincidence is impossible. I still don't know what you want though, Mr. Turner. You failed to make yourself clear." Bob could hear from his deliberate speech and hard R's that he was from the Northwest. Whatever people might say, there was a prejudice against Easterners who moved to town believing that they had all the answers and would show the locals how to do it. They always seemed to fail badly and then move to Los Angeles. Bob couldn't muster a breath to answer. "I am speaking in good faith, Mr. Turner. We have a lot at stake here. As you have somehow learned, Ringwald will be purchased in 3 months. We have little choice. As the populations of Florida and Southern California have grown, so have losses from brush fires and hurricanes. Most years we do well, but when we have a bad year, we don't have enough cash and have to borrow money. If we sell off some of our risk to other companies, we become less profitable. Very shortly, you and I will no longer work here. It is the fate of people like us. People who can make things happen aren't needed when the status quo returns. It makes a relationship with a woman especially difficult, don't you think?" With this, he seemed almost sad for a moment. "We're sort of a brotherhood, I suppose. I will expect to hear from you by the end of the week. Keep your requests in proportion to your information. I'm sorry I haven't got to know you, Mr. Turner. Thank you." Bob felt scorched, as if he had been in the sun too long. The secretary handed him a piece of paper and said, "Return to your desk and pick up your personal items. When you make up your mind, call this number." The elevator ride down seemed shorter than the ride up. He walked to his cubicle. It looked tiny and cheap. The potted palm looked ridiculous. The desk looked like just what it was, particle board covered with plastic. He picked up his blotter and clock and walked out of the building. He had been upstairs for only 20 minutes.